Okay, there we go. Are you ready? Okay. So, for those of you who know me, okay, I talk for a long time, and I'm going to shove as much information down your throats as I can possibly fit. Swallow what you can, okay? All right, I'm an apologist. This is the kind of thing we do. But hopefully we can really build upon what's happened this week so far. It's been a wonderful time together. That time of prayer was very meaningful to me, as I think it was to all of you. I think we're all cognizant of what the Lord is doing in our nation now, and now we need to get on with the work, to be His hands and feet. I have the privilege of speaking about 3 things on the slide that are captured. Truth. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about what I believe is a biblical understanding of spiritual warfare. And then I have that verse there because this is a whole section on truth and reconciliation. And we have a lot as Christians to bring to the table in terms of truth and reconciliation. In fact, I would argue we are the only people who can really bring reconciliation. We'll get to that towards the end. All right, so here we go. Hopefully I won't cause a fire with my technical. Okay, this is the verse that, interesting enough, time to rise, John. We've got guests, so Andrew at the back there from Matatiel is visiting us. He's a good friend from Matatiel, and John, brother here from the Free State. This is the verse that also was with Arnu. Same verse for this ministry, by the way, was this verse, if the foundations be destroyed. Now, you know and I know that you can put as much polyfiller on that brick wall there, it's not going to work. Even if you were to use some bricks and not polyfiller, it's still not going to solve the problem. Because the problem is the foundation. Okay, and I used to be a surveyor, so I understand this. If the foundations are destroyed, the structure will never stand. You can patch it up as much as you want. It will not stand. It will come down in the end. Okay, so we talked about this verse. So this group was actually convened, for those of you who are new to it, out of a crisis that emerged within the Dutch Reformed Church, and seeing the sad state of affairs in that church. And then a bunch of brothers got together. We decided to do something about it. And we weren't the only ones who had those concerns. So there were others, and we attempted to stand where we could. But let's face it, much of the church of Jesus Christ today is sick, and Africa is no exception. But if you compare African churches to places overseas like Europe, where I lived for 10 years, and America, you would be running to Africa, because for all our problems that we have in Africa, the church still believes that Jesus is Lord, and we fear God at some level. Hopefully that will remain, and hopefully this thing, which is no trivial issue in God's sight, will be a point of blessing for the African nations for the future. The EU and the current American administration and many other NGOs are putting tremendous pressure on African nations, and in particular African churches, to acquiesce to various demands, chief amongst which is the establishment of a value system and ethics foreign to this continent, and also at odds with the historic Christian faith. So I think we find ourselves in arguably the most terrifying verses of all of Scripture, Psalm chapter 2. I actually get afraid when I read that Psalm chapter 2. It starts off with, why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against His anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds and cast away their cords from us. Okay. The world is looking to burst off the bonds. What bonds? The bonds that apparently God has put upon the nations. You go and read what follows. And I want to go and hide in a cave. There's a level of sarcasm, and God, He laughs at them. He will subject them to His wrath and His fury. It's a scary psalm, that. But it's true. Okay? Liberty and freedom, according to the world, is to burst the bonds of God, cast away the restraints of God. What does that look like in our times? To paint Christianity as an invasive, oppressive system of belief with its oppressive views of family subjugation through the patriarchy, which acts like an opium to to oppress women and children. That's just the narrative of our times. We spoke about this. How fast have some of you considered? How fast has culture changed? Villy and I spoke about this. Changed so quickly, become so different so quickly. How did this happen? How did this happen? Right. On the true nature of spiritual warfare, I've referenced this verse at the beginning of the thing. Very simple verse. It's that there was this group of men. Looks like there were 200 of them. Very simple verse. Understood the times, and importantly, they knew what to do. I would submit to you, the church doesn't understand the times we're living in, and because of that, we have no clue what to do. There are some who are beginning to understand the times we're in. I might be one of them, but I'm not sure what to do yet, but I'm going to pray and ask God to find out. And I think that's where some of you are here. We want to know from God what to do next. We want to be like these men. Okay? Now, this battle that we're in now, okay, is a very interesting battle, and it's extremely subversive, which is part of warfare. Warfare involves itself in deception. Okay? And of course, Satan is the greatest of all deceivers. So, I also want you to let you know that we need to be gracious towards people. Some people have no idea what has been done to them or what ideas they've bought into because of how subversive this fight is. And I'm going to show you some aspects of this. So I'm going to stick with some military warfare analogy because the Bible talks about that. Paul uses a lot of language. The New Testament is replete with language of warfare, spiritual warfare. Ephesians 6, think of Ephesians 6 that's used the imagery there of the armor bearer, fight the good fight, Now, we don't war as the world does. We have those verses there from 2 Corinthians that talks about that, okay? That the weapons of our warfare are not of this world. But in some sense, this is my kind of, what I see as I look at the church engaging in spiritual warfare. The Crimean War, where the Russians were fighting against the Turks, in where the war is currently unfolding in modern-day Ukraine now, the French and the Brits had allied with the Turks to fight the Russians. And at a very famous battle, where there was this famous military event called the Charge of the Light Brigade, the French had amassed on the one side of the valley with the British, and the Russians on the other side of the valley. And the British were very famous for their cavalry units and how effective they were with their cavalry units. And the French were brilliant infantry. And the French were standing up on the valley, looking down into the valley where they could see the British cavalry unit. And the Russians were at the other side of the valley organizing themselves with their artillery and their weapons. And somewhere along the line, there was either miscommunication or bad communication, but an order was given, and this cavalry unit, the British, took off across the valley floor, 650 men, straight headlong into these Russians. It's called the Charge of the Light Brigade. Okay? And of course, as you can imagine, as 650 horses are bearing down upon the Russians just loaded up those artillery pieces and their weapons, and they just cut this British cavalry unit as it plunged headlong into these Russians. And as this was unfolding, the French could see it mapping out in front of them. They had like a bird's eye view of this thing. And the French field marshal said this in French, and Villy would probably be able to translate it for us. C'est magnifique, mais ce n'est la pas la guerre. Is my best French. Okay. What did he say? He said, it is magnificent, but it is not war. Much of what we're doing in the church with respect to spiritual warfare has the appearance of being like it's good, but it is not effective. Young men tattooing verses on their biceps, It's going to lay great damage to the kingdom of darkness. Really? Really? Some worship leader writing another song is going to lay great damage to the... I think not. I think not. And this is another military analogy. In the war in North Africa, the Allies had a problem with Rommel. Rommel was a particularly good German military commander. And so they struggled to outwit this chap, okay? And so what they did is they got involved in deception. And so they actually hired some guys who were experts at disguising machinery. And so they would take vehicles and they would make them look like they were not. Deception. So here you see them with a tank, making it look, turning it into a truck. Well, why would you do that? Because in a desert, at a distance, if you can confuse the enemy to position his armor in the wrong direction, because he thinks that what's coming from the south is a bunch of transport division, so then he says, don't worry about that, they're just bringing supplies, because behind you, you've got a bunch of trucks disguised as tanks. You have your enemy facing in the wrong direction. That's what happened. They fell for it. And they beat them. Deception. One of the other incidents was that they had to move a lot of equipment into North Africa, and the best way to move equipment is by sea. So they had to occupy a port, but the problem is once you put all those ships in the port, you put all of your resources in a nice little hole, little bucket, and then the Germans can come and drop their ordnance on top of the whole lot and just sink everything in the harbor. So what they did is they created a fake harbor a little bit further down the road, okay, with just enough to throw off the German pilots so that when the pilots flew over, they would fly past the harbor and drop their ordnances on basically cardboard boxes and a bunch of pipes and a bit of wood. It worked. Brilliant deception. Now, if you think that men are good at deception, how good do you think Satan is? I mean, he's had a lot more experience. He's the master. Could it be the fact that we are in a time of great deception now? I would submit to you that we are. Okay. The next issue then, we talked a bit about truth. Because we talked about foundation. So what then is the foundation if the foundations are destroyed? What do we do then? And what is the relationship between truth and foundations? Well, I'm going to argue that the foundations of which Psalm 11 is talking about is truth. How do we know that? Well, this question comes up. Ironically, it's the question that young people are asking today. What is truth? They're looking for authenticity. They want people to be real with them, the truth about whatever it is I'm going through in my culture. And it's kind of indifferent to whatever culture you're in, because kids in black cultures are also asking questions about sex and sexuality and marriage, and the same questions. There's some issues there that are specific to our communities and certain challenges specific. But a lot of those questions are shared. Okay? And it's ironic because Pilate stands in front of Jesus and he asks this question, what is truth? Jesus had a lot to say about truth. If you don't think truth is foundational, well then, how about these verses? If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples. Notice that, if, there's a conditional. If you abide in my word, and you are truly my disciples, then you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I suppose you could frame it in a negative way. If you don't, then you won't be set free. Truth is what sets people free. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. The person with the most radical view of truth who's ever existed was our Lord Jesus, because he called himself the truth. Okay? And at the bottom of these battles is an understanding of spiritual warfare according to the battle for truth. Let's take arguably the most succinct section of scripture we have on spiritual warfare, 2 Corinthians. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of this world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. What is the substance of spiritual warfare? Well, it's fairly clear. There is a way that there is a fight out there. There's a way that the world wages war, but we don't fight like that. We don't build an armory and get guns. We don't have jihadists. Okay? But we are in a fight. And apparently you and I have access to weapons that have divine power. Now I would like that. I want that weapon. I want a weapon with divine power. I mean, this gets the charismatics and the Pentecostals crazy. Oh yeah, we want those weapons. Well, apparently you and I have access to it. What is it? It's the truth. Because it's the truth that takes ideas captive. What ideas? Bad ideas, false ideas, ideas that are contrary to God's creation and His Word. We don't know how to talk to our young people about the most fundamental thing about the faith, the truth. In an age where we're all told there is no such thing. This is ground zero, folks. There's nothing beneath this. Spiritual warfare is not a battle of power. Michel Foucault is wrong. And everybody else who thinks it's about power. Why? Because you don't fight an omnipotent being. This is bad theology. We don't need to get involved with power struggles with people. Because all power is with us. We are involved in a battle for truth. Taking ideas captive and making them obedient to Christ. That is the true nature of spiritual warfare. And if your mind is diseased and feeble, and you cannot think, what follows from that is you're not going to be effective at spiritual warfare. Because it's your mind that deals with truth. We have to produce a generation of Christians that have huge hearts for Jesus, but sharp minds as well. And I'm not the one who made up the greatest commandment, that you love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and your mind. It mentions your mind. Think of Romans 12, that huge transition in the text. After Paul's done all the teaching in Romans, from Romans 1 through all of the problems and the fall of man up to Romans 3:23. Then he talks about how we appropriate, because for all have sinned, and that we appropriate the righteousness of God through Christ's work, and that by faith, the example given of Abraham in Romans chapter 4, by faith we appropriate this righteousness. Okay? And then Romans 5, 6, 7, and 8 talks about our process of sanctification and how it's a wrestle. Romans 7, think of Romans 7. Paul talks about the wretched man that he is. Then there's those glorious verses in Romans 8. Thanks be to God, the Holy Spirit, and the love of God. And he concludes Romans 8 with the love of God. And then, of course, the question is going to come up naturally in the mind of the Jews. What about us? And so Paul spends Romans 9, 10, and 11 dealing with the question of the Jews. And then there's a massive transition. Therefore, Romans 12, present yourself as vessels. 12 verse 1, and then it goes on to say, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your heart. No, by the renewing of your mind. And the word that is used there is the same word we use for metamorphosis in the Greek. It's a radical transformation. And it's interesting because that transformation of the mind is connected with the second half of that verse, which is to find out what the will of God is. You want to know what the will of God is in your life? I tell this to young people. Learn how to love Him with your mind. That's what the verse says. We need a radical transformation, not just of hearts, of minds. We have a bunch of young kids who have huge hearts, but they can't think. They don't know what the truth is. If you ask them for a definition of truth, they couldn't give you one. So this is critical. This is where what true spiritual warfare is fundamentally all about. Now, we need to be compassionate. Of course, as Chris mentioned to us as well here, that be mindful of the fact that part of the challenge of presenting the truth in the culture is we're up against Satan, and he does veil them. It's not an easy thing to do. So there needs to be grace on our part. But let us not lose our confidence. If we are in the truth, we should show young people that. And we should move forward with confidence because we know what is true, and we need to teach them grace. 1 Peter 3:15, apologist verse. Always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you, but do this with gentleness and respect. There's the grace. Truth. Here's why I believe what I believe. And I'm going to say this to you nicely and graciously. Okay, so we're in this now, okay? So we need to understand the times. One of the most scary verses in the Bible for me is 1 John 5:19. Okay, you end off that beautiful epistle. It says that Satan is the prince of this world. Okay, he's our chief adversary. Ephesians 6:12, before the armor, talks about principalities and powers. We are in a fight here, well beyond the levels of human control here. They're all just instruments in these demonic powers going on. Okay, so what does it look like now? Because this is very theoretical. This is very theological. I've got no problem with that. But I'm going to show you how the theology is true. Because I don't want you to be left going, well, I'm not so sure where we are today. I haven't helped you if I've left you there. Well, here we go. Since we've talked so much about Andrew Murray, culture's changing because apparently you have to be gay to know God wins the Andrew Murray Book Prize. Wow. Things are changing. Interestingly enough, this notion of things being changing, it was spoken about by some people. This concept of what we call as controlling the culture and cultural changes is heavily discussed by certain individuals. It's called hegemony, hegemonic powers. Antonio Gramsci, who was a Marxist, says that the dominant ideology of society reflects the beliefs and interests of the ruling class. Gramsci argued the consent to rule of a dominant group is achieved by the spread of ideologies, beliefs, and assumptions through social institutions such as schools, churches, courts, and the media, amongst others. These institutions do the work of socializing people into the norms, values, beliefs of the dominant social group, and as such, the group that controls the institutions controls the rest of society. What is he saying? Look, if you want to control society, then you have to control the institutions that govern society, and you need to control the cultural issues there. Okay. Who is he? Who is this man? This is the father of cultural Marxism. This man is the father of the social justice movement. You are living in that right now. There is not a single institution or community in South Africa that isn't profoundly affected by all of these issues. Pick the issue and I will show you how it's connected. I don't care whether this guy is living in the middle of Zululand. I will show you how what's happening in his life is affected by this. Because he's got to go to school. Or he's got some idea about what a man and a boy is. He's got some concept, or a young girl's got a concept about what she thinks a woman is. What it means to be a liberated woman. There isn't a single issue that's not affected by this conversation. Okay? So let's watch it. Let's play this now. Watch the African culture changing. Let me show it to you in front of your eyes. Here we go. First video.
Goeiedag, good day, Dumelang. I'm Beata Groenewald from the SEC.
I'm MK Robinson, and I'm chairperson of the Campus Pride Society.
As you know, Gender Awareness Week is from the 8th until the 12th of August.
And we're challenging you in less than 1 minute.
Tell us, what is gender identity to you?
I am a woman in the same way a tomato is a fruit. You wouldn't put it in a fruit salad.
My pronouns are she, they.
He, him.
They, them.
A man means to love and protect for the woman I love.
I believe everyone has masculine and feminine sides.
I believe that gender is a spectrum.
I'm comfortable with my femininity.
It's just another thing you call me, like my name or hey you.
Be creative in what you say and do in the video.
And submit it through the Google Form link.
Before the 1st of August.
And the winner, who will be chosen by your votes, can win wonderful prizes to spend on campus.
And remember, be yourself.
Everyone else is taken.
Yeah, that conservative school in Potch there, the Doppers. Oh, and that's just the start. I've got an entire lecture just on Northwest University. Completely appropriated. At multiple levels. Policy documents, curricula in various things. Young people from different backgrounds. All. The one person in there is the first student I know of, had a double mastectomy. Not because she's got breast cancer, but because she believes she's a bloke. Netflix just made a documentary about that person. Miles. His name's Miles now. Here we go. Apparently it's all about rights now, human rights. Where is it going? I got a WhatsApp from a friend of mine who's in the ANC Youth League. They are doing new drives now to do political campaigning in regions now because the elections are coming up. The ANC have an in-house LGBTQ team who are part and parcel of all those drives, going into Ikageng and everything. It's part and parcel. It's going to happen across all our cities. It's part of the program. It doesn't affect Xhosa culture. Well, not according to News 24. Eastern Cape teen who lives as trans woman to undergo traditional initiation into manhood. Andrew lives in Xhosa country. Oh, this doesn't affect African culture. You're wrong. Flat wrong. Doesn't affect us? No, it does. There's not an issue that isn't affected by this ideology. Not a single one. How about this for you Afrikaans folks here? This is a paper presented at Northwest University. This research aims to fulfill the long-existing gap in the Afrikaans queer-identifying community and non-binary individual-specific way of queering language as an expression of their identity and lived experiences. You read on with it. Culture is changing. Culture hegemony is the battle. And you are living in it, whether you are aware of it or not. Do you understand the times that you're living in? Do we know what to do? These might be hard words. You might not like to be hearing what I'm saying this. If I'm saying it forcefully, I'm not saying it because I'm trying to be offensive. I'm telling you, I live in the universities and I see this going on. And I see it cashed out in our churches. Addictions to pornography doesn't just affect rich white boys. Black boys are affected by pornography as well. John's a pastor, he will tell you. They also get addicted to pornography and all kinds of other things. And you know what? It's no accident. It's engineered. Wow. How do we end up in this mess, which we're all lamenting, which we seem powerless to do anything about? Could it be the case that it's actually been intended? Yes, it has. Gramsci says this. Socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media by transforming the consciousness of society. They said it, folks. And you are living in that. The appropriation of the institutions, the universities, the churches, law, media, everything. You change the cultural narrative, you change the hegemonic discourse, and then you control everything. And everything that Christian ministry is doing is dealing almost exclusively with putting band-aids on wounds. And nobody is fighting the thing that's causing the injury. Our universities are responsible for this. Not just in our nation, in the global West today, it has been the appropriation of universities in the West that is going to lead to the downfall of the West. That's right. It is that simple. You can pick an organization like BLM. You look at the popularity of this movement across our political landscape. Fees Must Fall campaign tied into this. Our cricket players bending the knee. Sportsmen bending the knee all over the world. I've seen stuff on BLM from Nepal. Dalit Lives Matters. Who are the Dalits? They are the lowest in the caste system. Here we go. Hang on, let me go back to this one. Sorry, next slide. Black Lives Matter. It's all about racism. No, it isn't. They are Marxists. It's about Marxism. That's what it's about. The social justice movement has got very little to do with social justice. It's everything to do with the establishment of a Marxist socialist ideology wherever it finds itself. That's why I could never reconcile these two things. Being anti-racist and then over here being anti-family. What's the connection between anti-racism and anti-family? I couldn't put the two together. Like, I can understand you being opposed to racism, but why do you hate on the family? That doesn't make any sense. If you're a Marxist, it makes perfect sense. How do we know that? Because the first person to start hating on the family was Karl Marx. Here we go. From the Communist Manifesto. This is where BLM gets their stuff from. Abolition of the family, even the most radical flare-up of the infamous proposal of the communists. The bourgeois society will vanish as a matter of course when its complement vanishes, and both will vanish with the vanishing of capital. Capitalism is the problem. What undergirds capitalism? The nuclear family, which means the family has to go. What is our biggest problem in South Africa? Broken families and fatherlessness. Who's engineered it? Our universities. They teach a philosophy as you help these young broken families that drives against everything that you and I hold dear and sacred. I defy anybody to show me how this is not true. And I'm only showing you the tip of the iceberg here. There we go. The bourgeois claptrap about the family and education, about the hallowed correlation of parents and children becomes all the more disgusting. That's straight from Karl Marx. Has our country been influenced by Marxist ideology over the years? You betcha. Apartheid came to an end. Marxism didn't. Right-wing socialism came to an end. Left-wing socialism has remained, and it's intensified, and it dominates everything now. Okay. Just to give you some idea, I have this picture of this beautiful lady up here. Why do I say that? Dominates. Because one of the very first movements to be co-opted, taken over by the Marxists, was the feminist movement. Okay? The feminist the female Russian feminists wrote some interesting stuff about the family. They had contempt for the family as well. Long before the 60s sexual revolution, the Russians had their sexual revolution. In fact, in the 1920s, the Russians called themselves progressives. as we are in the West today, progressives. Julius Malema said, I am with the progressive forces of the world today, referring back to his communist heritage. Well, of course, the question I want to ask is, well, which ones? Because the West are all calling themselves progressives, and they call themselves progressives. Which progressive camp are you with now? The EU, or your Chinese heroes? Which progressives? They all call themselves progressives. A new culture. This is the latest photograph from Northwest. They've just updated the flag at Northwest University. They usually hide this when they have an open day. They put a scaffolding over it so all of the Afrikaans guys in their Land Cruisers and khakis don't see it. So it's usually hidden at that stage, and then they take the scaffolding down. But they just updated the flag. You can see they've taken the rainbow flag and added the trans. That's this wedge that comes in there now, because the transgender and the old school LGBT guys have to come together now. Because there's a big fight between them, between the TERFs, the old school lesbian and gays, and the contemporary transgender folks. So here it is on our campuses, Northwest University, UCT. When you see them messing around with gender-neutral pronouns, know that this thing is coming in. And if you're not sure that they're opposed to the family, how about this? Disrupting gender. Decolonization necessarily requires degendering. Yeah. Decolonization. We need to get rid of that African, that white man's religion here. We need to get back to our African roots. Well, apparently, in order to do that, to get rid of decolonization, you have to degender the people as well, according to UCT. Beyond the binary. Genesis. God created man and a woman. That's a binary. Get rid of that idea. If you don't think that this is explicitly opposed to God's creation, I can't help you. And now all these things you've heard are becoming a little bit more clearer, hopefully, because you're living in this, and nobody in this country escapes this. Nobody. Destroy the binary. We had a position now in universities where apparently you can't define what a woman is anymore. Well, if you can't define what a woman is anymore, then you can't define what sex is anymore. So then sex becomes a social construct. And now we put that into our comprehensive sexuality education programs, which then gets taught in all our schools across our nation, where the teachers get trained at UCT and Stellenbosch and elsewhere to go into the schools in KwaZulu-Natal or Matatiele and teach them CSC and say, all these ideas you've believed about girls and boys, it's wrong. It's all part of the colonialist oppression. That's where you're living. That's the times we're living in. Here we go. You can go and join the Trans University Forum and raise your fist, the great sign of peace. Stellenbosch University. What's that one about? What's this one all about? What is that? It's the androgynous society, because your gender can be whatever you want to be. That's from Stellenbosch University. How about this one? Queer activism in South African education, disrupting cis-heteronormativity in South African schools. Yes, our universities are producing curricula to show we need to get into our public schools and disrupt that oppressive, binary-affirming, traditional family institutions. Stellenbosch University. Folks, don't worry about the EFF. You need to worry about Stellenbosch University. And this university here. They teach the same stuff. How profane, how rotten, how anti-real we have become. And here we go, University of Pretoria. Yeah, they're teaching students how to use the new pronouns. Ze, zers, zers. That's right, they're coaching the people. It's called cultural shift. You think it's happening? I can go on. How about this next one here? Queer lawfare in South Africa. Imagine this stuff, Andrew. coming into our law schools now, okay? Queer lawfare in Africa, legal strategies in context of LGBTQI criminalization, politicization. With those nice friendly fists there, you know, that's a great symbol of peace, is it not? What is this a symbol of? Revolution, power. What's this thing do? Smash you. It's a dictatorship of the proletarians. Go and read Karl Marx. This is not a symbol of peace. And there, University of Pretoria, that's nice. We really like that. Those little friendly icons there. How does it begin? Here's how it begins. It takes a modern university to disabuse you of truth. Because you at home, you stupid Christians, teach your kids some basic common sense things, and then they arrive at university and they get told, you know, that's just naive. It takes a modern university to disabuse you of truth and common sense. And I'm going to show you why they do that. Here's how they do that. Psychology class, gestalts, okay? Who sees the old man? Raise your hands. Who sees the young maiden? Raise your hands. Oh, you see. You see? Some of you saw the old man, and some of you saw the young woman. You see, there is no truth out there. It's just down to your perspective. Yeah. You see, you arrogant Christians come in here with truth. Go and get an education. Haven't you taken a class in psychology? I'm showing you, this is how it's done. Yeah, exactly. So how about this one? Is it round or is it square? Well, it depends upon your perspective. Nobody has the truth. Who are you to come in here and tell me your Christian values, your white Christian? That's just your experience. This is my lived experience. That's the big buzzword at university. Lived experiences. Philosophically, it's this, what is called subjectivism or perspectivalism. Or truth is like this, you know? It's kind of like an elephant. Basically, we're all kind of bumping into this thing like blind men, and one thinks they've found a spear, and one's found a tail, and one's found an elephant. Nobody really has the truth. We all kind of got different parts of it. So stop being so judgmental, you Christians. Because what's true for you is true for you, and what's true for me is true for me. That's out of our universities. Who are you to come here and force your views on me with your exclusive claims? We want diversity, equity, and inclusion training. What is it? It's fundamentally a battle of philosophy, of epistemology. Because the university says you can't know reality. You can't know the truth. You only know the truth as it applies to you. And so you need to stop getting off your Christian evangelical evangelism horses, going out there and telling people they need to change their lives. Who do you think you are coming over here? Go and get an education. That's how they sell it to you at university. This is how they sell it to you in film. Because they control us now. Watch how they're going to sell the same philosophy to you here with this very famous movie, The Matrix. Run this clip there, Ben, thanks.
You wanted to know what the Matrix is, Neo? Trinity? Try to relax. This will feel a little weird. This is the construct. It's our loading program. We can load anything from clothing to equipment, weapons, training simulations, anything we need.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe? Your clothes are different, the plugs in your arms and head are gone. Your hair has changed. Your appearance now is what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self.
This isn't real.
What is real?
There it is.
How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know.
Okay, kill it, Ben.
The world as it was at the end of the 20th century.
That's enough. What is real? That's what the university comes in. Now, of course, they're going to be more academic about it. They're going to show you gestalts on that. But this is how it's communicated to you through the media. And young people eat it up. And parents just look at this and go, what's that movie all about? Not knowing what ideas have been communicated. And I mean, I could just do lectures just on movies. Just show you movies teaching all this kind of ideology. Avatar, you name it, full of it. Okay? How did we get there? We got there because of these people. Most of whom you don't know. Who are these people? These are the leading social justice scholars. They lead our universities, and everything our politicians believe about everything comes from what they teach. These people run your lives whether you like it or not. Not the EU. The EU believes the things they believe because of these people, because they're in the universities. It's as simple as that, folks. And if you read their literature, you realize that they just get their literature from these guys. Who are these guys? Well, they're a bunch of Marxists. We have Marx there. Where's my thing? All right. And what do they have in common? They have a skeptical philosophy in common. From Marx to Gramsci on to these guys here, which are these guys from the Frankfurt School, Herbert Marcuse, George Lukács, the Hungarian, Adorno, Horkheimer, all thoroughly going, have two things in common: philosophical skepticism and Marxism. Add to that the French existential thinkers, and you have everything that is the cocktail of what is being taught at our universities and in the West today. You take a man like Frantz Fanon, okay? This man here is the most, ideologically, the most dangerous man in Africa in terms of ideas. He's also the person who's inspired more political thinkers than any others in Africa. His book is called Wretched of the Earth. You should do yourself a chance and go and read it. The first volume of that book is on violence. We're going to look at some of that. In the new document governing the policy of transformation at Northwest University, he's one of the key influential figures. In chapter 1 of his book, he calls for the slitting of European throats. University of Northwest may want to make a footnote saying that whilst we agree with Fanon about these issues, we don't advocate the slitting of white people's throats in South Africa. Not even there. Why? Because the faculty at Northwest don't even read those documents. Nobody cares. But it is the governing document of transformation at Northwest University. So this is where we are, folks. We are here. We are here to a large extent because these guys all share the same philosophy. And it is tied into the philosophy of this guy here, this German idealist Hegel. Okay, it's going to get a bit academic now, but I'm going to show you this now because I'm going to show you how at the heart of the issue of the battle for truth is also the battle for reconciliation. Okay? We want to look at that at some level. Right. So, we talked a bit about this. I may want to make mention of this just quickly. By the way, we go back before we go to Marx. So this kind of philosophical skepticism, which is part of our university, okay, which is also, by the way, the main thing behind the collapsing of the NG Church, because Jacques Derrida is the philosopher to which the liberals appeal, okay? So this solvent will destroy both the church, but it'll destroy just about anything above it. Because once you give up on truth and you say there is no truth, you end up with moral relativism, religious relativism. We have that going on. Well, religions are all basically the same. Epistemological religion, there's no absolute truth. Who are you to force your... And metaphysical relativism. We can't know reality. The universities sell this. Once you can sell people this philosophy, you can sell them anything, and we have been sold anything. When a girl will have a double mastectomy for an ideological reason, know that you have been sold everything and nothing at the same time. This is the deception we're living in, folks. But apparently, once you come to this understanding and you've moved from the oppressive ideas of Christianity, that oppressive white man's religion, you can become woke, you can become enlightened. This is just what woke means. Technically, it's to shift you from your false consciousness, which is as a result of your Christian convictions that oppresses you, to lift you out of that out to what is called a critical consciousness, which is where you will get the word critical theory from, critical race theory, critical pedagogy. All of this stuff is just Marxism applied to these issues. Queer theory is just Marxism applied to the question of sexuality. The decolonization debate is just Marxism applied to the question of colonialism. And to be woke is to become a young person in the new culture who sees these things, who realizes that Christianity is oppressive. What's happening in terms of spiritual warfare? Gramsci said it. You need to break the cultural hegemony. If you want a political outcome, which is revolution, you've got to go upstream and change the culture. You've got to have a cultural revolution first, which is why you need cultural Marxism. And in order to do that, you've got to go upstream to the institutions that produce ideas. So you've got to infiltrate predominantly the universities, the church, and the family. Why? Because these are the three that deal with ideas. They've got the universities. If you get the universities, then you get corporate world, media, arts, entertainment, politics, law, and government. How do you get the church? You feed them liberation theology. You feed them Marxist rhetoric. You turn Jesus from savior into Che Guevara. You turn him from reforming of morals to revolution. And what do you do to the family? You abolish the family. You tear the binary down. You tell woman you can't define what a woman is. You tell men that they're useless and worthless. And you hypersexualize the kids. Folks, we're living in these times. You've all bumped into this. Now we understand it at some level. Question is, what do we do about it? Okay, this is the fight we're in. In short then, here it is. Social justice movement is a Marxist movement. The philosophy is critical theory, and these are all the things that go with it. Diversity, equity training in the corporate world just is the stuff. Here's one picture to sum up the whole affair. I've done this slide because I try to capture this. I want a one-slide picture to show people what spiritual warfare looks like in our times. Not in some vague way like the charismatics and Pentecostals who are worrying about these non-existent demons that hid behind the bush last week in this vague, nebulous way, in a specific, very directed, clear way. So we know who we are fighting. Here's the battle on the bottom. This is what they want. They want this. They want revolution. They want social change. They want to get rid of capitalism. Okay? And the reason why, the best way to get rid of capitalism is how? Again, get rid of the family. Because it's the nuclear family that props up capitalism. Who said it? Karl Marx said it. Okay, so here's how it goes. But think about this now. What do? You go to the university and you tell people that they cannot know truth. Once you can undermine truth, then you can sell them anything. Because then you can redefine what love is. And what love is means to affirm everybody. Think of this. This just is the N here church debate. We must affirm people who are struggling with their sexuality. Homosexuals in the pulpits, we're just fine with that. We need to love them. But here's what's important. If you look at God's creation, the first institution is made is the family. From the family, you put a bunch of families together, you get a church. It was the church that built modern-day universities, and the universities which give us a lot of this. So it doesn't matter if you find yourself, for example, in the corporate world, you can do great things for Jesus there. But if the church is falling apart and families are a mess, it's game over. I work in the university. Oh, let's take Andrew. Andrew works in law. Suppose Andrew does great work in his legal business there and has an impact for Jesus. That's great. He should do that. But if Andrew can do all the work he wants there, but if around him the churches are falling apart at the seams and families are broken, it's not going to amount to much. Now the question is, how do we fight back? How do I take Frik van Niekerk in the Free State, who's working in providing mealies, and say to him, Frik, what are you going to do about this? And he's going to go, my bakkie? Ek weet nie. I can say to him with the greatest conviction, Frik, go back home and love your wife and teach your Christian ethics to your kids. And nothing does more violence to this than doing that. Really? I'm not the one saying it. The enemy has said this. Don't let them teach their kids the Christian ethic. Destroy their families. Everybody can be involved in this. Once we see this, once we can unmask this thing, and you can see it clearly, the way we fight back is become this gentleman here from KZN, speaking to those little Zulu boys. I loved your stories you were telling, the gentleman with the beard there, talking to these young men, but showing them what it's going to be to become a real man, to become ultimately a real father, takes responsibility for his family. Nobody comes into my house and comes and speaks nonsense to my kids. Because I'm the guardian here. You come talk to my wife like that. You don't teach this stuff to my children. You don't come in here with your gangsters either. Take my kids away from me. And you don't go down the road to the woman who's a single mom and bully her children, her little boys either, for your gang. Why? Because I'm going to be standing in the gap when you show up. That's what the fight looks like. We're going to need some people to fight this in the universities. We're going to need some Andrews to fight this in the courts. We're going to need, as we see with our brothers, to stand between the mobs, as John, as we're going to see, has done. We're going to need some men of courage. We're going to need some women who are going to tell the feminists, look, I don't need to have you tell me what it means to be a woman. Thank you very much. So here we are. Then, it said, it's the center of the bull's dartboard, the family. And it is staggering to read the literature and how in great detail they lay this all out. It took them 50 years. You can even track the fight. From Herbert Marcuse in the 1960s, in the 60s sexual revolution. You can follow the whole fight. I remember as I was reading this, I was going, gosh, Lord, what are we going to do now? Because now I see him. Now I see the target. Now I know as a Christian man what I'm up against. Not in some vague way. Just praying into nothingness out there. I know exactly where we need to direct our prayers. I need to say, here's some young men and women. Send them. We're going to go here. We're going to bring life here. What does any of this have to do with reconciliation? Okay, let me just show this to you. I've been thinking about this. You can share it with me. Okay, so a little bit of Hegelian philosophy here now. It's okay for you. Here's Hegel. Hegel had an interesting view of history. He thought that as history and time progresses and people live through history, we move down the corridor of time, okay, in this direction, okay, and things end up being contrary to one another in this dialectical framework, okay? And as you take certain things, ideas come up, okay? And these ideas are different from one another. They actually contradict one another. And this contradiction between these ideas creates a state of tension. And out of this tension will emerge a new thing. Okay? And so this is what's happening. So you take Marx, was a Hegelian, he picks up on this and he says, well, look, this is true. The problem is in societies, you've got two kinds of people. You have the bourgeoisie and you have the proletarians. And this is a tension. And so out of this is going to emerge a revolution. It's going to lead to a socialist society, and out of a socialist society, we're eventually going to have a communist society. This is very rudimentary, but this is what Hegel's system is about. It's about these two opposites. It's these two opposite things, perpetually in tension with each other, contradicting one another. It's a dialectical battle between these two things. Okay? So now you're a feminist. Well, who's on this side? The man. Who's on this side? The woman. Pick your poison. Intersectionality. Rich is this side, poor is this side. White this side, black that side. This is just how they see everything. Everything is seen through the lens of Karl Marx. It's always a breaking down of people according to these what they call these intersectional categories. And you put everybody on this grid, perpetually at odds with each other, perpetually in conflict with each other, with no reconciliation until the revolution comes and it moves out as you move through this progression. That's how they see everything. Okay? The Hegelian dialectic. It's important that you understand that. Because this is the problem, according to Marx. The bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, that's why we've got to have eventually what's going to happen is we're going to move from feudalism to capitalism to socialism to communism. Through this Hegelian dialectic and these tension. Where do the critical race theorists come in? Yeah, we're going to move from the situation of white supremacy against everybody else. The popular word for it is intersectionality. It's what they teach at universities. And our students read these books. Okay? These are all the famous social justice scholars. Legal Theory with Kimberly Crenshaw, Andrew. Mapping the Margins is the paper she wrote. Patricia Hill Collins. If you don't think it's true, take a look at this. This is called a matrix of oppression table. Notice what we've got here. We have two columns. We have the oppressed group and we have the dominant group. Your two Hegelian things. Then you've got the issue in the middle, and you pick it. Race, class, sex, heterosexism, religious, ableism, able-bodied people, nationalism, colonialism. Then you have to ask yourself, what side of the column are you? So see how I fare. White, I'm not doing too well. Owning class, I have some things, not doing too well either. I'm a normal bloke, so I'm an oppressor. I'm heterosexual, so I'm not doing well. Guess what? I'm also a Christian. Which is the oppressive religion? Christianity, which are all of the oppressed religions, all the other ones. You think you're going to get reconciliation from this? We talk about, it's not happening. They're not just opposed to you as a man, they're opposed to you because you're a Christian. This is taught in our institutions, folks. Here's another one. Same thing, the Marxist idea, privileged group, social group, bourgeoisie, proletariat, male, female, white men, bio woman, gender conforming, transgender, queer, heterosexual, other people, rich upper class, less wealthy people, able-bodied people, disabled people, Christians, not just Christians, Protestant Christians. You are the oppressors of society. With your white man's religion here. John, you look at all of these oppressors you're surrounded by here. You need to become woke, boy. You need to wake up from the oppressive Christianity that's put you down, brother. How do we know that? Well, didn't you get a university education? And according to the EFF, we can read it there. There's Patricia Hill Collins there. A bit of Vladimir Lenin in Kuruma. This is what's going on, folks. It's this us versus them. Us versus them. Frantz Fanon, massively inspirational to so many political leaders in Africa, was ethnically African, but philosophically he was a thoroughgoing Marxist and French existentialist. The foreword to his book is written by Jean-Paul Sartre. He says there, in order to triumph, the national revolution must be socialist. He takes the master-slave dialectic, so again, Hegel, yes, here, Frantz Fanon, master this side, slave this side. Okay, described by Hegel, in which the unmediated contact between the two subjects leads to the subordination of the one subject to the other. This concept has been used to theorize forms of colonization and patriarchy. Here we go. Here it is, all tied back to Hegel. 1937, this Russian builds a whole philosophical system. It influences the French intelligentsia, people like Jean-Paul Sartre and Frantz Fanon, and Frantz Fanon picks up on this as well, and it's the basis for his ideas on colonialism. He is the father of the whole, all the ideas about decolonization tied to Frantz Fanon, and it's fundamentally Marxist, and it's tied onto this Hegelian system. So, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Roll up your sleeves, yes. Look at this verse. See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition. This is a philosophy according to a human tradition. What is a human tradition? Marxist atheism, socialist humanistic philosophy, according to the elemental spirits of this world. Not according to Christ. There is a philosophy according to Christ. You better make sure you have it. And if you don't, you need to take a little check on what you're doing. Scripture has warned us. Most Christians are anti-philosophy. They think we just believe the Bible. Sorry, the Bible does not teach that. Paul very clearly demonstrates in the book of Acts that he was familiar with the worldviews of the pagans. He quotes from their own poets, Acts chapter 17. As even some of your own poets have said. He understood what the Greeks believed. He confronted their worldview. We see that in the book of Acts. To be anti-philosophical is to end up being anti-intellectual. And this is a problem in our churches. We've got a lot of young people who can't think. Philosophy is not just for high-level academics. Everybody's doing philosophy at some level. Because you all ask the question of what is good, what is beautiful. That's a philosophical question. What is right, what is wrong? Why should I do this? Those are philosophical questions. And there is a philosophy according to Christ. Furthermore, the Bible does not entertain philosophical skepticism. However sin has affected us, the Bible says that you and I can know reality, that we can know something about the nature of God from the things that have been made. Romans chapter 1. And then when you say you don't, you lie. The Bible says in Romans chapter 1 that homosexuality is wrong. Why is homosexuality wrong? Not because Leviticus says so, but because it says that it is unnatural. Which means you need to know what the nature of something is. Which means you have access to reality. And you know what something is for. The eyes are for seeing. The mouth is for speaking and eating. You know what your sexual system is for. Kids understand that. And we know that when two men are together, it is unnatural. Homosexuality is not wrong just because the Bible says so, but because nature says so as well. Because God created that. And when you tell kids you can't have access to reality, you've cut them off from God's other major revelation. Right. So, maybe we can run the next video then.
Never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
26 years later, the Rainbow Nation finds itself in another major crisis.
You and your government don't represent me. You represent your own interests. You are disgraceful.
Government corruption and high crime rates, a failed economy, and continued poverty have caused many South Africans to lose hope yet again.
And that is why we have arrived back at the same question that we asked before the fall of apartheid. Is there hope for South Africa, or will we make the same mistakes all over again?
The ideal future for us has to do with us learning from our past.
What is our 100-year plan? What is the master plan for this nation 100 years from today?
So we'd like to take you back to the early 1990s, when millions of people were gearing up for civil war in South Africa. Two of the best negotiators in the world, Lord Carrington and Dr. Henry Kissinger, along with a number of other significant world figures, were called in. But they abandoned the peace talks and left the country, fearing a South African Armageddon. A miracle was needed to avoid civil war.
A miracle is a temporary suspension of the laws of nature. It's when something unnatural happens. So natural people cannot create a miracle. There has to be somebody outside of the laws of nature, and it can only be God. But how does God work? God works through people.
And I think that's what we saw in 94. We were prepared to negotiate, but the non-negotiable is that Mr. Mandela and those who are in prison from all political parties and those who are in exile must return. I realized when I became president in 1989 that I had one term to bring about the changes which the National Party has then already agreed upon within its own ranks in principle.
We didn't know whether ultimately there's going to be a war within the country or not.
And part of what made apartheid survive as long as it did is that people didn't understand each other, didn't know each other, they just were enemies, scripted to fight.
Ek wil daai mense vra om my te help. Ekskuus dan ek wil gail.
Well, that evening, we would be flying to Ulundi to try and save the election.
There were just too many coincidences. They just were, for me, pure and simple God incidences.
South Africa woke up next morning, quite unaware of the dramas of the night, and the election was carrying on smoothly. Do you think God was in that? I think so.
If you haven't seen that documentary, you need to watch it. Most of what we've all been told or believed about 1994 and what happened there is false, or it's a half-truth. Nelson Mandela and de Klerk had very little to do with it. In fact, the talks broke down. Kissinger and his other guys left the country. It was actually a Kenyan man that they collared, forced him to stay in here, Christian people. It was not in the Union buildings in Pretoria or Cape Town where this country found reconciliation. It was at a prayer meeting in Durban at King's Park in the VIP rooms. And Mandela and de Klerk weren't even there, and no international mediators. It was mediated by Christian men and women. And everything you've heard about the past is a fat lie. And God was behind it all, and none of us knew about it. We are going to need, in this country, a return to something like that. We're going to need not just peacekeepers, peacemakers. And we are the only ones who can provide a basis for peace and reconciliation, because we know what it means to be reconciled. Peacekeeping doesn't work, only peacemaking. But we have a basis for going in for reconciliation, because we know what it means to be reconciled. The scriptures are replete with this. This aspect was what brought the Christians to bring an end to the abolition of the slave movement. Think of the book of Philemon, seeking reconciliation between the slaveholder and the slave master. None of this Hegelian nonsense. Paul says to Onesimus and to Philemon, you need to come together, see each other as one. Because you're all one in Christ. It destroys this Hegelian nonsense and hogwash. So long as our universities teach this and teach Marxism, there will be no reconciliation. There will be a fist in the air and there will be revolution. And it is coming to this nation. And we need to wake up as Christians and preach reformation and not revolution. But we had better understand something of these philosophies. Not all of you, some of us. But if you don't understand, at least be aware that when you see the carnage out there and the fatherlessness and the brokenness and what's going on in our institutions, know this, it's not just an accident. It is engineered. It has been created, and our universities drive it. And the culture drives it through the media because it comes from the universities. I defy anybody to show me how I'm wrong. If I am wrong, please let me know. Because this is a massive thing to be stating here. I don't want to mislead Christians about something as significant as this. Because this man here who's going to speak next is going to tell us what actually happens when revolution comes. So I'm going to hand over to you now, John. If I can leave that with you. Yeah, you guys can stretch your legs.
Yeah.
Also get
Thank you.
there.
Okay, that's good.
You wanted to fall off these lines.
Okay.
Just for the camera.
Okay, thanks, man. Wow. Yeah, thank you so much, man.
So you can
yeah,
see that.
That was
You can
powerful.
see. You see the philosophy behind it.
Yeah.
That's why I said your distinction there is a powerful one, because I can show you the revolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can show.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah. We
That's
just sit
powerful.
down and do some work together.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
We can communicate this.
Definitely.
Because if I'm lecturing on revolution and you bring a reconciliation,
come on,
it's going to work.
come on.
Yeah.
That's a kingdom partnership.
Yeah.
Tell me, would you mind to share your slide with
Absolutely.
me? I just want to go